For problem number 3, it says create a new script file named units.m. In your script file, perform the following. Prompt the user. Once again, this means I'm going to use input. To enter in the type of units, use a branching statement. So it just says branching statement, which means I can choose between an if or a switch. Okay, it doesn't specify, so use what you want. To determine the type of units the user entered in, options include, okay, so there's lots of options in this one. Distance units, temperature units, mass units, force units, and unknown. So I have a default. Here's my else for an if or an otherwise for a switch. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 knowns, which means I have 1 if, 3 else ifs, or 4 cases. So if and 3 else ifs, or 4 cases in my switch. Then depending on the result, print out the following message. So print out means I'm going to use disp or fprintf. If it doesn't tell me which one I need to use, go ahead and use whichever you want. Where UUU indicates the type of units. Distance, temperature, mass, force, or unknown. Okay, so this is very similar to an example that I had in supplementary videos, so sorry if it's the same. Okay, but I have a new file, so new script, save it as units.m. Prompt the user to enter in type of units. I'll call it units or whatever you want to call your variable. Input units. It doesn't need to be fancy. Keep in mind, I'm expecting this to be text, so I need my S. Then I go ahead and use a branching statement. You can use either one. A switch statement is easier to use with text. Notice I'm comparing units to all of those different options. So a switch is easier to use with text. I will show you lots of options. So let's start with a switch. Switch. So I have 4 cases, I already know that. And an otherwise. Once again, you get partial credit. Write this down right away. What are my cases? My cases are, if you have more than one case, if you have more than one option per case, you put them in braces. So my first one is meters, feet, kilometers. I enter in all of my cases. That's case 1. Case 2, it's going to be temperature. So I have F, C, and K. For case 3, I have grams, kilograms, pounds, and stone. So British unit, where 1 stone is like 14 pounds or something. Force units, newtons, and pound force. There we go. Those are all my options. When you write a switch statement, you are comparing one variable to all of those different options. The variable I'm comparing is my units, my input units for my user. User units. My otherwise is everything else. There we go. That's my basic switch statement. Now I need to go ahead and print out my message. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can print out your message right in here. So disp, nope, I'll use fprintf. If you're ever inserting something, like I'm inserting the units, I like to use fprintf. It's easier to use from my perspective based on what I've practiced compared to disp. So I'm printing out the user entered in, and then I'm inserting whatever type of units. Units. You can use display, and those units would be distance. You can use display instead. The user entered in distance units and type it in directly. Either one, it doesn't matter. So if we use display, we can go ahead and type each one in separately. Temperature, mass, force, and unknown. That would work perfectly fine. Another thing you can do is you can create a separate variable that contains whatever the units are. So type units. Nope, didn't want to do that. You can do like type units equals distance. So now whatever down here. So with display, you can display it in each branch. If you want to use fprintf, you can display it in each branch if you want. You can also just create a second variable that's going to go ahead and store whatever those units are, and then you can print out fprintf once. Either one works. Let's go ahead and run it. So in theory, you should test it with each case. You probably don't have time to test it with each case, so just go ahead and pick a couple. So let's say the units was feet. They entered in distance units. Let's say the units was kilograms. They entered in mass units. They entered in Celsius. Temperature units. Entered in newtons. Entered in force units. Entered in something else. Unknown units. And down here, I forgot a \n. And what we can see is printed out once with the display and once with the fprintf. That's what it looks like with switch. If we want to do it with an if statement, it looks very similar. Or it doesn't really look similar. I don't know why I keep saying that. I said that with fprintf, I said that with display. It doesn't really look terribly similar. But we have all of our options. These are all of our options. So one thing we can do is we would have to compare it with each option. So if I'm comparing my user units, I'm gonna call it U for this one, because then it's shorter. U, I would need to compare with each option. So if U equals meters, except with text, I can't do that. At least with single quote strings, I can't do that. So I would have to use string compare. So if string compare U is equal to meters, or string compare U is equal to feet, or string compare U is equal to kilometers, and then I would keep going. So if it's equal to meters, notice this one gets pretty long. Yard and miles. That's my first option. And then I can go ahead and display the user entered distance units. And then I would have an else if. Same thing. String compare my units now with my temperature ones. So Fahrenheit, Celsius, or Kelvin. And then I can go ahead and display temperature units. Then I have another else if. String compare. Now what? I've got 4 options. Grams, kilograms, pounds, and stone. And then they entered in mass units. And my last one, else if, I only have 2 options. So if it's equal to newtons, and if it's equal to pound force. Entered in force units. And then else, unknown. Okay, so let me run that, and I can go ahead and check it. Kilometers, distance units, Celsius, temperature units, grams, mass units, and pound force, force units, and some other gobbledygook unknown units. So I can test it with each branch just to make sure that it's working. So that's what it looks like with an if statement. This is our first option for an if statement. Our second option for an if statement is if we want to use double quote strings. So if you want to use double quote strings, it's easier. So you can just go ahead and say U equals string U. String U is going to go ahead and convert it from a single quote string to a double quote string. Then you can go say U equals meters, or U equals feet, or U equals kilometers. And then you can just keep going. Just like you do normally with if you had numbers. So instead of using string compare, these need to be double quote strings. Notice MATLAB is yelling at me, so that means something's wrong. So here we go. For this one now, I can compare it to Fahrenheit, Celsius, or Kelvin. Change this one to grams, kilograms, pounds, and stone. Change this one to newtons and pound force. I can go ahead and run this one. Yard. Kelvin. Stone. And newtons again. And then some unknown gobbledygook. And there we go. Those are my three options. This is what it looks like with a switch statement. It is the simplest version, where you can display within each one, or you can have a second variable that stores whatever units need to be. Here's what it looks like else if with single quote strings. Here's what it looks like with double quote strings. But those are your three options.